Hi, I'm Randy Christian with the Essential Faith Project. This is a tutorial for people who are using the spiritual health assessment. I need to emphasize it is not intended to give you an introduction to the spiritual health assessment or the essentials themselves. There are other videos that are designed for that purpose. In addition, if you need help with specific information about each of the essentials and how to strengthen those, I would refer you to our book, The Essentials of Spiritual Health. What is it that the spiritual health assessment is designed to do, and how exactly do we as leaders make sure that's what's happening? The spiritual health assessment is designed to do exactly what it sounds, and that is to assess the spiritual health or strength of individuals, of marriages, and even of churches. Now, the way we do this is first by determining which of those three is what you want information about. And I would actually recommend all three because there's nothing that says you can't get information on all three at the same time. So to review, the individual is used for pastoral care, for counseling, and the individual, having taken that, can, with a spouse, then take the marital version. The marital version can be used to help with pastoral counseling for the marriage or for marriage enrichment, or to simply understand what is the strength of couples in our congregation when it comes to spiritual health. And that brings to the third, and that is the congregational strategy. As a congregation who is participating in the spiritual health assessment, you can have the people who take it in your congregation make sure that they click the box that has the data from their assessment downloaded into the metrics for your church. This will give you an ongoing cumulative picture of both the individuals and the couples who take the spiritual health assessment. And this allows you to see from one time frame to another whether there's been change, but also to target maybe everything's going great with prayer, but Bible study needs some work. So you're able to target, if you choose to, what your teaching and training is going to be doing as a congregation. Now, having decided this, the next step is, before evaluating the spiritual health, to make sure that you know whether the individual or the couple actually belong to the Lord. I recommend sitting down and talking with them and using a very simple paradigm of the Lord's table. Picture a table with three chairs around it and the fourth chair occupied by the Lord. The three chairs represent three phases of a relationship with Jesus. Obviously, this is oversimplified, but it can help us to at least understand in general where our people are. Phase one is the person who is curious. Now, maybe they're hanging around because their girlfriend wants them to, or maybe they've seen something in the ministry of the church that intrigues them. But this is a person who has not made a commitment of their life to Jesus. Now, obviously, it's not on or off. There's growth that happens as that person grows in their curiosity and in their interest in the gospel. The second chair is the commitment chair. And while people can be anywhere on the continuum from the first chair to the second as their curiosity grows, there is a point where an individual responds to the gospel and says, I accept Jesus as my Lord, as my Savior. So before that point, we're talking about someone who is not a Christian after somebody who is. The third chair is the maturity chair. The maturity chair is for those people who have reached a point where they are relatively mature. It does not mean that they have stopped growing, because none of us ever do. But it means that the essentials are present and somewhat balanced in their lives, and that they're committed to continuing to have those grow in their lives. It's important to look at this before looking at the spiritual health individually or maritally, because if you find that a person has not yet given their life to the Lord, then the application of the information we get about the essentials is going to be very different. And that person is not a candidate for spiritual health and spiritual growth, but rather for evangelism, for making that commitment to Jesus as their King for the first time. Now, once that's been done, it is important that as a leader in the church, you give instructions to your people as often as possible to make sure that there is a general understanding of what the spiritual health assessment is, why you're trying to have them do it, and what's going to happen once they do. I found there are several things that need to be emphasized. Number one, it is very easy to do. It literally will take most people 5 to 7 minutes to complete. Number two, it is very, very private. Unless they say that the information should be released, not even their data without identifying information can be given to the church. On top of that, no one will see the specific report with their name attached unless they tell us to send that report to that person by giving us their email. So it is extraordinarily private, and no one needs to worry about other people finding out or about being shamed. Side note, it is a shame that in the American church we have to say that we have to address that. But between our culture and some church history, the fact is a lot of people are very concerned about it. So please do not make the mistake of thinking that isn't important to your people. Okay, once you have emphasized how easy it is and how private it is, then it's important to emphasize why. What is going to come from taking this that won't have happened otherwise? The first and most obvious is they themselves will have a picture of their own spiritual health. Areas that are strong, areas that are somewhat neutral, areas that need to be strengthened. The second is they can give that to anybody they want to have that person help them develop a strategy for spiritual growth. The third benefit is for married couples, a picture of the spiritual state of their marriage and a roadmap to strengthening their marriage so that they're very different from all of those statistics that you see of marriages in our culture. The fourth, and perhaps the biggest impact, is that when churches participate, and it's free of charge to the church, then if they get 100 people in their congregation giving their data with no identifying information, they have an extraordinarily clear picture of where their people are spiritually and what they need to do or not do in terms of strengthening them. This can be used in numerous settings: individual pastoral care, pastoral counseling, marriage counseling, evangelism, determining whether they're even Christians to begin with, building leadership through leadership development, using it as a way to strengthen the congregation as a whole. And we recommend that people get into a mindset where this isn't a one-time thing any more than going to a doctor and having a checkup is a one-time thing. I recommend that everyone have this done at least once a year, far preferably twice a year. But if you've got somebody in a leadership role, I strongly encourage that person to have it done at least quarterly, because leaders are held to a higher standard. And it is important that we look at our own spiritual health so that we don't inadvertently mislead someone else. Once you've determined that people understand, then it's time to give them specific instructions. They can log on by going to essentialfaithproject.org and clicking on the tab for spiritual health assessment. At that time, they will need to decide whether they're logging in individually, which everyone has to do to begin with, or if they've already done that, logging in to a ministry or logging in to a marriage. Once they log in, then they will select their assessment. They will answer the questions. The questions take literally 5 to 7 minutes. And then they will tell us at Essential Faith Project who gets to see that information. If they're willing for the congregation and the congregation's leadership to see the aggregate of information with no identifying information about them at all, then they simply click a box telling us which church to send those metrics to. If they're willing for a specific person, perhaps a pastoral care provider, a small group leader, maybe even a spouse, to see their specific report, then they enter their email of the person they want that report to go to. This can be done as often as possible. Literally, somebody who has created a login and is using this can take this once a day if they really want to. Once that's done, immediately a report is generated and sent to anybody that the person taking the assessment tells us to send the report to. Most importantly, the report immediately shows on their screen for their use. Before doing anything else, both you and they need to understand this report is not labeling them or diagnosing them. What we're doing is telling them what they have told us about some pretty important areas of their spiritual health. So it just provides a mirror for what they've told us. Second, when you get the report, it is extraordinarily important, both for you as a leader, if you haven't read this before, and for them to read the introductory information. Now, the introductory information is not specific to them, but it is specific to either the individual or the marital profile. If they do not read and understand the introductory information, it is very possible that they will misunderstand what is being told to them in the report, misapply it, and cause damage to their relationship with the Lord or to their marriage. So it is very important, read that first. Having done that, then look at each of the individual essentials and the score that was given for that based on the answers. First, focus on those that are strong. In our society, too often, we immediately look at what is wrong and what we want to see changed. But the fact is, most of us are going to have strengths in these areas, and we need to focus on those strengths. So before anything else is done, read what those are. Make sure that the person taking the assessment, or in the case of a couple, the couple taking the assessment, understands that, and above all else, does not change what's causing strength in their individual life or their marriage. Now, once that's been done, it's time to look at the areas that need to be strengthened. It is easy, if there are a lot of these areas that are weaker, to feel overwhelmed. I find this to be especially true for new Christians because most of them have not yet built the disciplines or the habits into their life that the spiritual health assessment is addressing. So this should not concern anybody. It should simply give a roadmap to develop a strategy. Because if we try to do too many things, we get what I call the New Year's resolution effect. How many of us have made a list of things we want to see change in the new year? And we look at this list, we try to do all of them all at once and feel so overwhelmed that within a week or two, we've just forgotten the whole thing. All that does is cement us where we are. Instead, I encourage the individuals and the couples working with one of their church leaders to identify the areas that are most in need of change and will have the greatest impact on other areas that can be strengthened. For example, often in the American church, we find relationships with other Christians are weak. This is an area where people have relationships with several people whom they can be totally honest, they can tell their doubts, they can call them up and say, I need help to avoid a temptation or to pray with you, and somebody will be there for them. Now, one of the best ways to build those relationships is to invest in a small group. And as people invest in small groups and over months build trust, what they find is not only do those relationships build, but other things that happen in the small groups are also strengthened. Bible study, prayer, worship together, often service together. So by focusing on the one trait, they can often improve many. This is an important way to make sure that we don't overwhelm ourselves or take on a negative attitude, but instead see something that we can do something about and then see positive change happen immediately. In addition to looking at the reports, we need to sit down in whatever role we're in with the individuals and relate that to that role. If, for example, I'm doing marriage counseling, then I need to make sure they understand why it is so important for them to pray and pray together for their marriage to be strong. And then help them develop a plan to gradually build their marriage prayer. Once a strategy has been developed, then of course the next step is to implement that strategy. But before going there, I want to remind you of something that we've said in other videos and even here, and that is that if we only look at what is reported and trying to do something with regard to that, we almost always will fall into the trap of becoming mechanical or even legalistic in our faith. We need to remember our faith is not based on these things that we do. These are faithful responses to our relationship with the King, and things that, because of the way we've been built, will strengthen us individually, maritally, and as a church. But we need to go back and always remind ourselves of the importance of individual worship. That everything we do, including becoming involved in a small group or praying more or reading the Bible more, whatever we're doing is done because we know our Lord has reached out to us. It's not about making him like us or love us. It's because he already loves us. And in response to that, as his people, we do these things and present it as an act of worship to him. Finally, leaders in the church need to be sure that this is not a one-time thing. The spiritual health assessment is designed to be part of an overall strategy of discipleship where we're constantly looking at ourselves and asking, are we who we are supposed to be? So, with that in mind, we need to make sure that we do follow up. First of all, if we know the specifics of someone's report, we need to immediately encourage them and help them as they begin to implement changes. Second, we need to make sure that if there are resources that they need that don't have, that we provide those. So they need to be in a small group, we can help them get connected with a small group. If they need to know how to study the Bible so that they can do that, we in the leadership are tasked with training them to do that. They need to pray more, but they don't really understand how to do that. We are the ones who coach them and show them how to do that. So we need to provide those resources. And then picking up on that word coach, we need to do this on an ongoing basis. Checking in with them. How's it going? Are you running into any problems? Are you finding things are going great and you want to move to something else because you're experiencing such growth from this? This is the role of a spiritual coach. I don't use this in a technical manner, but in the way that all of us in America have grown up understanding. In a coaching relationship, it is the athlete who does things, but it is the coach who tells the athlete how to do it, watches what they're doing, and helps them, if they run into problems, to be able to do it in a better way. This is part of shepherding, and it is the role that God has given us as leaders in the church. Finally, we need to repeat this. Again, the spiritual health assessment should never be a one-time thing. We have set up the fee structure to make it so that for a very low cost, individuals and couples can use this for an entire year. And we encourage them to do that, using it twice a year, quarterly, or even monthly if they're making major changes, so that they can see that and be encouraged by it. I hope this has been useful to you as you consider your role in helping your people use the spiritual health assessment. Let me say one last thing. What I haven't really emphasized yet is you using it. One of the most important things you can do is make sure that you yourself are using this, not just to know the ins and outs of the program, but to be sure that you are growing the way you need to. Above all else, that will set the example that will encourage and motivate your people to grow. If there is any way that we can help you, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at essentialfaithproject.org.